All right, and I'd like to welcome today Dr. Racheal Brooks and Dr. Siobahn Day Grady for course design considerations for inclusion and representation. Please take it away.
Thank you so much, Barbara. And thank you all for joining us today. As you can tell, we are thrilled to have you in the virtual room with us as we discuss and move a conversation forward, one that's already happening. But we wanted to provide some insights, some research-based best practices and strategies that you can use as you're thinking about ways in which you can enhance your course design, specifically to promote inclusion and representation. And so today, I am delighted to be joined by my colleague. We're going to quickly introduce ourselves, and then we want to know who you are, who all is joining us. So as Barbara had mentioned, my name is Dr. Racheal Brooks. I have the pleasure of serving as the director of the Office of E-Learning at North Carolina Central University in Durham, North Carolina. And I also serve as co-chair the University of North Carolina System Quality Matters Council, and am a facilitator and a program reviewer and master reviewer and all things in and outside of quality matters. And so it is a pleasure to be able to apply the experience that I have in being both an instructor, leading an instructional design unit, and being heavily invested in quality matters to help you enhance what you're doing in your online programming. And Dr. Grady, if you will go ahead and introduce yourself for our audience.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Brooks. It is a pleasure to be joined here today with Dr. Brooks, who was very modest in her introduction. She is so excellent. I am an assistant professor in the School of Library and Information Sciences, and I'm also a computer scientist and a STEM ambassador. I'm honored to be here today with you as we're going to discuss some inclusive practices that you can implement in your classrooms. And I do a lot of other things besides teaching and also serving as a STEM ambassador. I do a lot of things, but I don't want to talk about it. I have my link to my website that's available in the white paper that you can take a look at. But we want to thank you so much for joining us today. And I see a lot of Eagles in the house. And so thank you so much for joining us as well.
Thank you. So we are going to go ahead and get started, and we want to know a little bit more about each of you. So if you would tell us about yourself, we are going to go ahead and activate just a quick poll. You can join at slido.com. Dr. Grady is going to share a link in the chat that you can use, and you can join with number 4738731 and tell us about yourself. What role do you hold at your respective institution or institutions? We already see the instructional designers chiming in. Excellent. Are you an instructional designer or a faculty member? Perhaps an administrator, a QM coordinator, an instructional technologist, or a librarian, or maybe we have not captured the role that you hold on your campus, but please go ahead and share that with us. Oh, thank you so much. Look at that. We already have 146 participants. Fantastic. So we'll let that go just a few more seconds to get an idea of who is in this virtual room with us. And as we go through our presentation today, we are going to provide examples, and especially as you are entering your questions in the Q&A, please feel free to reach out to us about specific examples or scenarios, and we'll do our best either to answer them live in real time, or we will get a transcript of what's provided in the Q&A and make sure we get those responses to you. All right, so I see it's starting to slow down a little bit. So far, we've had about approximately 230 colleagues respond, and it looks like the majority of our audience are composed of instructional designers. So we have about 44% who have responded saying they're instructional designers, 37% who are faculty, 17% who are administrators. We have 10% who we do not have their titles listed on here, but we know you are critically important to the work that's happening on your campuses. We also have 7% that are QM coordinators, and we have 1% of persons who are librarians. So thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to how you are going to assist in contributing to the conversation. We're going to delve right in. So these are our 3 objectives for today. We have a very short time with you. But in that time, we want to make sure that we are explaining how inclusive and representative course design benefits, validates, and liberates all members of an online learning community. We're going to examine evidence-based models that normalize inclusive design practices in online spaces. And we are also going to explore strategies for incorporating these inclusive, representative, and emancipatory design practices that we're going to share with you today. So we're going to ask one more poll question before we get started. Tell us, what comes to mind when you think of inclusive, equitable, and representative online learning? So this new poll that we're launching, again, you can join at slido.com. And please feel free to go ahead and share. It can be a one-word phrase, or it can be just a few words, but excellent. So we see accessibility. Ooh, that's a big one coming in already. Okay. So keep sharing with us. What are those ideas, concepts, or even practices that come to mind when you think of inclusive, equitable, and representative online learning? Now, we had about 230 participants last time, so let's see how many we can get this time. We'll give it a few more seconds. Excellent. All right, it looks like accessibility is really coming in as one of those principal concepts that we think of. Okay, UDL, very excited to see that. We will be talking about that as we go through. Access, belonging, equity, fairness, welcoming, excellent, culturally responsive, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, fairness, we'll lump those two together. And it looks like a lot of the peripheral descriptors tie in very closely with the ones that are standing out, those salient ideas and concepts. So safe space, we're referring to language, and that it will be something that we will talk about today. Intercultural competence, excellent, I love that one. Social justice, absolutely. Student-centered, very, very focused on where we come from when we think about how we engage and how we utilize the Quality Matters rubric, being student-centered. Exceptional. All right. Well, we are going to delve into a lot of the concepts that you just shared as we progress through our presentation today. And so we're first going to introduce this crucial role. What is the crucial role that inclusive design plays? And so when we think about inclusive design, it's important for us to define what exactly do we mean when we're referring to diversity, inclusion, and equity. There are many definitions, but what really stands out is this idea that diversity describes the richness of human differences, including socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, language, and individual aspects such as personality, learning styles, and life experiences. And we want to emphasize this idea of richness. Diversity is not something that we should think of from a perspective of deficit, but how does it add? How does it contribute to the experiences that our students encounter when they're engaged with us in our online courses? Now, equity underscores the existence of systemic and historical barriers that contribute to the disparities negatively impacting underrepresented and minoritized groups. We need to, when we're working on creating an environment that is equitable, it's important for us to identify what are the systems that are in place that jeopardize the concept of equity. And how can we ensure that we are working to dismantle those systems that intentionally minoritize our learners and present barriers to them? And as we're focusing on inclusive excellence, not just inclusion, but inclusive excellence, we want to emphasize the student intellectual and social development and the need to create, as we saw in that word cloud, a welcoming community that values cultural differences. Bell Hooks stated exceptionally, to teach in a manner that respects and cares for the soul of our students It is essential if we are to provide, or is essential if we are to provide the necessary conditions where learning can most deeply and intimately begin. Now, when we think about intercultural learning, it's important for us to consider the components that make up what exactly is intercultural learning. And what we know is that the combination of diversity, equity, and inclusion create an environment that sustains and promotes intercultural learning. And it's this effective integration of each of these three characteristics that promotes environments that are ideal for engaging in intercultural learning, that fosters the intercultural competence of our learners and enhances their understanding of diverse cultural preferences beyond their own. We all have our own perspectives. We are all shaped by our upbringings, by our environments, and we can learn from one another as instructors, as instructional designers, as administrators, as individuals who create learning experiences. It is our responsibility to tap into the richness of the diversity of our learning community to create these environments that support all learners.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brooks. Now we're going to move into inclusive course design models. Next slide, please. We're going to take a look at 3 design models, the first one being universal design for instruction. Then we'll follow it with inclusive design thinking. And then lastly, Morrison, Ross, and Kemp's instructional design model. First, with the UDI, the first thing I want to say is that as the developers for these courses, we know that we impact learners and what they will do in our classrooms. And what we wanted to do in this white paper and this work is we want to normalize inclusive design practices within these online spaces. And so now I'm just going to talk you through a little bit about this particular model. The first thing that we see here is that we want to provide equitable use of instructional materials. And the reason why we want this to happen is we want our learners to be able to access what they need in the classroom at all times. And we want them to do that so they can easily engage and interact with that content. We also want to provide flexible ways that we can implement those various strategies for supporting learners throughout the learning process. As you all know, within this pandemic, and I'm saying within because it still hasn't ended, even though we're somewhat back to normal, we have to be flexible in the way that we hope to have learning happen within the classroom. We also want to have simple and intuitive course design. We don't want our learners to have to try to figure things out, right? We want them to be able to get what they need in an easy way that's intuitive to them. We also want to have that perceptible information that is easily accessible to our learners as well. We also should have a course design that allows for a tolerance error. So we understand that mistakes may happen and we want to allow for that within the way we design our courses. So those are things that we need to provide consideration for as well. We also want to make sure that low physical effort is not discouraging our learners' ability to learn within the classroom. And so with that being said, we want to make sure that as we add different multimedia and other mediums within our courses, that we are giving an allowance for space and size, and that it's working with that environment. So we want to make sure if we have an image that is displayed at the right size. Also, if there's some type of YouTube video that we're including, we want that to be an appropriate size where our learners can get what they need from that as well. We also want to develop a community of learners. And that's important because one thing that I saw in the cloud that was also highlighted was that sense of belonging, right? We want our learners to feel that they belong in the classroom and foster that community. So they feel not only comfortable speaking with their instructor, but also to their classmates and their peers. And then we also lastly want to create an inclusive instructional climate that sets high expectations for learners. And so This one is sometimes can be a difficult one because we don't want to be too hard on our learners, but we want them to know that excellence can not only happen, but it's a capability for them as well. They are capable of excellence. And so this is what the UDI looks at. Next, we're looking at, and by the way, that also had 9 components. And so this next one is looking at inclusive design thinking. And you'll see a lot of overlap within these models. But one thing that I like about inclusive design thinking is that the first bullet here that we see, it helps us to empathize with our learners, which sometimes as a faculty member is not something that we're thinking about originally when we're creating our courses. But with the inclusive design method, what you do is you take into consideration your learners' needs. And so that helps us to design courses that are specifically for them by empathizing with them and their needs. Also helping to define learners' needs and articulate course objectives. This is important because, as we all know, the more we empathize and the more we put out there what learners need to know, it just helps to make a seamless course. And so that's important that we define those objectives so that our learners understand exactly what they're doing all throughout the course, and it's no surprise to them. Also, innovate for active and authentic learning. We know that our learners love to engage. They love to be on the fly, learn, actually take something that you just gave them and be able to apply it immediately. And so that's an important aspect of design thinking that also is extremely helpful when designing your courses. And then lastly here, prototype the course with activities for skill application. And so by creating these prototypes for your activities, it can help you see what the outcomes that learners may have from those activities. And so by prototyping it out, again, you're taking in consideration your learners' needs and what will work best for them with your course. And so design thinking is a great way that helps us do that as well. Next slide. And then Morris, Ross, and Kemp's instructional design model also has 9 factors that we're going to look at here. And the first one is articulating learning goals and identifying challenges or barriers to instruction. And this is important because we know that all of our learners come from various walks of life and have various identities. And so when we identify those ahead of time, this can allow us to make a more enhanced and unique course because we get to design it based on our learners and not a one-size-fits-all shop. And so I think this is important in consideration for designing your courses, which goes into the next thing, looking at the learners' identities. And that's important because it impacts their decisions. Because we all come from different walks of life, we think very differently, and how we approach things is also very different, and how we decide on things is different as well. Selecting course content and explicitly align those selections with the stated course goals. One thing about quality matters that I love is that alignment is so important. So this just goes in perfect hand in hand with those specific review standards by having those course goals align with the course content and having them explicitly stated. Also, defining instructional objectives and outcomes learners should achieve by successfully completing the course. Again, if you're doing this, you're already kind of following some of QM standards as well, but we want to just make things plain and clear. It's not only helpful to the learners, but it's helpful to us because sometimes we forget when we've designed the course exactly what we might have been wanting to convey at that time. But by doing this, it keeps us on the straight and narrow throughout the course. Also, verifying a consistent, logical, and sequenced course structure. This is important. Again, students shouldn't have to figure out, or learners shouldn't have to figure out where they're going. The more clearly and plain that you have things outlined, the more that they know from start to finish where they're going, which then leads into our next point here, which is creating that plan for instruction that guides learners throughout that course or content mastery and goal achievement. When you already have that sequence structure of the course, and then you have that plan on how they're mastering different skills throughout the course, these things just go hand in hand together and will help you and help the learners know exactly what's expected of them. Also encouraging developers to craft instructional messages and determine a suitable modality for offering the course. This is important because in this age, we know that although right now I'm on my web browser talking to you all, for our students, it may be the cell phone, right? It may be their smartphone. So having different modalities and ways that you reach your learners is very important, not only for their learning, but also for engagement as well. And curating and designing assessments for evaluating learners' progress throughout the course is important as well. You want to make sure that you're designing things such as rubrics, right? So that learners know how they're going to be evaluated and know what's expected of them so they can actually deliver, which goes back into those setting high expectations. And then also select relevant and engaging representative resources to support that learning experience, which is important. What you select as far as course content, it should be relevant, should be engaging, because part of what we're doing is we're actually not only helping our learners within the courses, but we're actually helping them to actually go out into the real world. And here in NCCU land, we say fly high. Our mascot is the eagle. We want our students to soar, not only in the classroom, but beyond, and make us proud. And so these are the three models that we looked at within the white paper and that we're going over today.
Pardon that. All right. So next, we are going to share with you some theoretical approaches for inclusion and representation. If you are anything like Dr. Grady and I, we love to dig into the research and see how the research supports the practices that we promote in these spaces. And so we're going to take a look at three today. These were highlighted in the white paper, and we want to share just a little bit more about each of them as we discuss this with you. The first one is the Socio-Emotional Learning Framework. Now, this is promoted and developed by our colleagues right down the street at North Carolina State University. They're collaborative for academic, social, and emotional learning. And so this framework highlights 5 elements that we're going to take a look at together. The first one being self-awareness. And so this refers to a learner's ability to identify and understand their motivations, their emotions, beliefs, as well as the values that they hold, and how they can impact, how they can shape the behaviors that they embody, depending on the situation that they're in. Another element deals with self-management. And so that refers to the learner's capacity to be able to control those emotions, behaviors, and their thoughts in different contexts. Now, this is specifically to help them meet goals, either that they have set for themselves or that others have set for them. But that self-management piece focuses on that control. Now, responsible decision-making deals with the learner's ability to not only assess, but also to make constructive choices about their behaviors and how they engage with others in different scenarios and different contexts. And so as we think about, how we are supporting our learners from a variety of backgrounds as they're engaging in our online courses, we want to look at ways in which we can promote self-regulation, specifically associated with each of these components, understanding that our learners' needs may be different. Well, most certainly will be different. And so it's our responsibility as we're designing courses and as we're thinking about how we as instructors, or if you are an instructional designer, an instructional technologist working with a faculty member, how you can encourage an environment that supports learners with these specific skills. Another one deals with relationship skills. And so we're looking at a learner's capacity to manage their emotions and behaviors in order to promote healthy relationships. So as Dr. Grady was pointing out earlier, the importance of creating a learning community. In doing so, we need to consider what are the various aspects of these learning communities. And part of that is having members of a community who are able to cultivate healthy relationships. Now, again, depending on learners' needs, we may have some students who need additional assistance as it relates to self-regulation or even prompting, because perhaps there may be situations, or they may be a learner who has difficulty engaging in social interactions or different experiences as it relates to connecting with other individuals. And so we can think about, how can we support our learners? We're not creating online courses for one specific type of student, but we are doing so to support the success of all of our learners and all of the abilities that they bring to our classrooms. The final one is social awareness, and this taps into the remaining elements as well. This deals with the learner's ability to be responsive to the needs, concerns, and perspectives of others. Part of that is understanding what exactly are those needs, how they may be different because of our backgrounds, because of our experiences, as well as how we are accustomed to engaging with one another. And so we want to create these learning environments and promote these interactions amongst our students in ways that are considerate not only of their affinity to engage with one another, but also providing guidance and support to help one another engage with each other. So the next framework was developed by Jeanette Castellanos as well as Alberta Gloria. And this deals with the Psychosociocultural Framework. And this was specifically related to the needs of Latinas and Latinos in higher education. We can learn much from it. And in doing so, we noticed that thinking about the university context, there are these three dimensions, essentially, the psychological, the social, and the cultural, that all contribute in various ways to persistence. Now, again, this is specifically related to persistence of Latinos and Latinas in higher ed, but we can also see how this is beneficial for a variety of learners. So as it relates to the psychological dimension, here we're talking about self-efficacy and self-esteem. How do students feel about themselves, about their identities as individuals, as well as their ability to advocate for themselves and to stand up for themselves? The social aspect touches on families and mentors. Who are those individuals who are providing motivation to them, or perhaps that they feel certain connections or responsibilities to? It may promote persistence in the university environment, or it may be something that can cause potentially an unexpected barrier. If there are students who feel as though because of familial obligations or a need, for example, to work outside of the classroom, that can impact their perception of, whether or not they're able to handle the work that they have, they're able to manage their time to devote both to the family as well as to their studies. And so we as instructors can connect with our learners, sit down and speak with them, talk to them to understand what perspectives are they bringing to the classroom and how can we support them in persisting in these environments. Another element focuses on the cultural aspect. So here we're talking about congruity between culture as well as their academic experiences. We challenge you to think about, as you are selecting your instructional materials, for example, how often are you intentionally selecting materials that are representative of students who are in your class, or even students who may not be in your class? An example of something like this, I teach a statistics course. And I also teach a research methods course. And I had provided for my students, we were studying, we were looking at case study research. And so I wanted them to understand, what exactly is a unit of analysis. And so we explored that together. And I wanted them to be able to identify in existing research, what was the unit of analysis that was incorporated. And I could have selected any type of material. what I decided to continue to expose my students to a variety of cultures, backgrounds, and ways of knowing, we focused on case studies related to that were conducted by and about Native American populations, indigenous populations. And so those students were able to look at case studies. They were still able to identify what were the units of analysis, but simultaneously they were seeing as selected instructional material an example of something that falls out of what we would traditionally think as far as mainstream education, to help show that there are diverse ways of knowing. There are a variety of examples that we can utilize that are reflective of our colleagues who are in these communities with us. So challenge yourself to explore, who are the exemplars? What are the examples that you're selecting as your instructional materials? And can you diversify them in a way that is meaningful to help your students see themselves and to see others in a positive light? And that also touches on ethnic identity. So do those students feel validated? Do they feel as though they are welcome, that their experiences and historical and ethnic backgrounds are celebrated in the online learning space? And how can we create an environment that does so that it can contribute positively to the persistence of our students who are joining us in our courses? The last theory that we're going to highlight, and this is one of many, is validation theory. And so Laura Rendon described validation theory composed of two main categories. There's the academic validation as well as the interpersonal validation. Academic validation deals with those entities within and outside of the classroom that encourage students to believe that they can learn and succeed. And then interpersonal validation focuses on entities in and outside of the classroom that support learners' self-development and social networking skills. And so validation theory happens focused on these 6 elements. There are these 6 ways in which we can promote validating our learners. One deals with faculty, advisors, coaches, and instructional personnel, and that we should actively offer assistance and encouragement to our learners. This ties in, and you'll see very shortly how it is promoted through the use of the QM rubric, but providing that feedback to our students, encouraging them and giving them assistance when they need it, supports validating them in these spaces. Learners who are validated feel self-worth, self-value, and they believe in their ability to succeed. And that belief can positively impact their persistence in these academic programs. Learners who feel valued and validated display confidence. Not only do they believe in their ability to succeed, but they display a confidence in their learning experiences and campus engagement, which also positively impacts the learning community in which they belong. When students see their peers displaying confidence, it instills in them motivation and a sense of understanding that, yes, they should also feel confident in their success and in the work that they do in the classroom. Validation should be a consistent presence. This is not a one and done. It's not a checkbox that we check off, but it is meant to be consistently present in and outside of the classroom. Validation is not a singular goal. So again, we are never necessarily going to achieve and say, yes, we have validated our learners and we can move on. But it is something, again, being that consistent presence that we build into the fabric of these courses that we're designing and these experiences that we're curating for our learners. And then finally, early validation of learners is critical to their success in the remaining years of matriculation. And so we want to make sure that we incorporate validation practices early, that we find ways to celebrate the successes of our learners, and that we continue to do so as they progress in their academic study, not only with us during, within a course, but also throughout their academic careers. Now, quickly, this next section that Dr. Grady is going to share with you focuses on the application of the strategies that we've just shared. What I'm going to do is in the chat, I will share a link to the QM rubric. And there are, in the next slides, references to a variety of specific review standards that are supported directly by the strategies that Dr. Grady is going to share with you now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brooks. You're doing excellent, but I just want to say I have been having an amazing time in the chat. So if you haven't been in the chat, that's okay. There'll be time for Q&A. And I need to hurry up so we can make sure that we have time for Q&A, because you all are so interested and we're so happy to hear that. So you've already heard from Dr. Brooks about these different frameworks that we're looking at. The first one is the Psychosocial Framework. And so here, the main thing that I want you to know, again, that this supports the redistribution of power within that learning space, and it offers learners an opportunity to determine how their learner experiences are constructed. And so here we have the three different dimensions: the psychological, social, and cultural, followed by attributes. And as Dr. Brooks mentioned, she's put in the chat the link to the QM rubric. And as you can see here, in parentheses and in bold and in blue letters, you can see the specific review standard that actually relates back to this particular dimension from the Psychosociocultural Framework. So let's take a look at one attribute from each one. Let's start with the psychological. The first one is to acknowledge potential concerns students may have. And so this is important because for these specific review standards, particularly 7.3, that actually looks at or learner support. And so by you actually implementing this strategy into your courses, you're actually, again, meeting those specific review standards. Next up, for social, when you invite learners to discuss the implementation of the assigned accommodations in the online learning environment, and again, this is a strategy, you're hitting on specific review standards 7.2, 8.3, and 8.4. So 7.2, that's looking at active learning, supporting learners through active learning, and also the specific review standards that are in 8, that's related to accessibility. So you're hitting on these standards and also these strategies that will help make your courses more inclusive at the same time, which is beautiful. And lastly, for cultural, promoting the student voice and perspective through sharing engagement and learning communities. And again, for these specific review standards, this one is related back to providing feedback and also learner and instructor communications and interaction within a course. So if you're applying these things, again, this is redistributing that power and helping learners understand the learning that is happening within your course. So I think these are good strategies. And again, the white paper goes way or further into detail about more strategies that you can implement, but these are just a few from the paper. Next slide. Now we get into the validation theory and practice. And this is an essential characteristic of inclusive and representative online learning faculty and designers, because they must ensure that the online courses center, acknowledge, and amplify the needs, the aspirations, and potential of all learners, especially those from historically minoritized or that are underrepresented. And this relates back to the chat that we were kind of having earlier. So follow up with that if you weren't paying attention earlier. And here we have the validation types, which are academic or interpersonal, followed by some strategies that you can implement as well. And I'm just going to go over one from each. For academic, when we provide representative exemplars, okay, through the selection of text or guest speakers and leaders that allow students to imagine their future successful selves. So one of the things that I wrote in the chat earlier with the discussion we were having is having diverse groups of speakers. I know you all have heard the saying, you can't be what you can't see. It is a reality. So by implementing this strategy in your course, you're helping your students see where they can be. And that's so important, especially for, as in the chat, we were discussing these first generation college students that many of you are teaching, or freshmen as they're making this transition. Also for interpersonal, And by the way, those specific review standards are there as well for that one. And for interpersonal, planning consistent, meaningful interactions to allow learners to actively support and be supported by their learning communities. We talked about that belongingness and why that's important. And again, this also relates to their interaction with you as an instructor as well. So by hitting on these points or this strategy, again, you're actually implementing some specific review standards as well. And then lastly, on the next slide, we're going to talk about emancipating engagement practices. And so for the emancipating engagement practices, we know that they're diverse, inclusive, and equitable, but they should also be accessible. We want learners to break free, and that's why we had that chain earlier with the transition slide. We want them to break free or emancipate themselves from the systems and barriers that attempt to hinder their success. And I said attempt. And we can do that through this nice cycle that we have here by validating. We want to challenge our learners to apply their own experiences and prior knowledge to solve real world problems. And this is important because learning happens in the classroom, but it actually happens outside of the classroom too. And students can show up as their full selves to bring all of that to help solve problems. And again, those specific review standards are there located underneath. Next up, we have comprehensive, where we'll incorporate positive reinforcement. And who doesn't like positive reinforcement, myself included? It's always nice. And so an example here is having leaders or scholars, advocates representing diverse communities. And we've already talked about that a little bit before. Next up, we have multidimensional, where we include authentic learning activities and also assessments that celebrate learners' ethnocultural identities, such as collaborative and cooperative learning. Again, having that culturally relevant instruction or pedagogy in your courses is so important so students can see themselves in the learning, and also not even the learning, the activities, and again, those assessments. It's a full picture for them. Followed by empowering, where we're providing learners with that clear description of how all of the course components are aligned. And if you're a QM person, which I'm sure you are because you're here, we love that term alignment, right? That they are aligned to support the achievement of the objectives. Again, everything has to be in alignment so students understand and it's clear to them how everything they're doing within the course supports each other thing within the course. Also, we have transformative, incorporating learning preferences and multiple intelligences in the creation of learning activities. We strive to be transformative, which is really important in this day and age. Things can't remain the same if we want to progress and move forward. So by incorporating these different learning preferences and activities, you're supporting all the learners within your course. And then lastly, the emancipatory, which is where we want to provide students multiple opportunities to engage in voice and choice. And that's also something that we were talking about in the chat earlier. It's about students maybe first year, not really finding their voice yet. So we want to create ways that they can break free from those systems, again, that attempt to hinder their success or be a barrier. We want to promote them breaking from those systems and engaging and participating and having opportunities where their voice can be shared and respected and appreciated. Next slide. Now, you've heard so much from us. We want to hear from you. We would like to hear or take some time at this point for you to share your actual takeaways that you've learned from this webinar. So you can join us again at slido.com using 4738-731. And I will also put the link in the chat again for you to engage with us and let us know what your actual takeaways were.
We will also have time shortly after this to answer some of the questions that we see come through the Q&A. So if you have any additional questions for us, please feel free to share them in the Q&A, and we will answer them live in the last 10 minutes or so that we have with you today. Yes, excellent. Yes, we certainly must design with intent. Excellent. So we see these coming up. All right. Diversity and inclusion are paramount. Multiple levels of engaging with students. Inclusive design is doable if we make it a priority. And this goes back to what, Quality Matters promotes in being intentional about designing courses. We want to put that forethought into the creation of our courses. And in doing so, these are just some other considerations that maybe we have not yet had in mind that we can start prioritizing so that we do create inclusive courses. Inclusion isn't something we put on afterward. It's something that we must build in from inception. Okay. Design for socio-emotional support as well. Absolutely. Someone had shared emancipating engagement practices will be something I will be implementing more in my courses. I really like how, they not only meet QM standards, but they make a course more student-centric. Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, we're very glad to share that someone has shared that they appreciated being pointed towards research-based theories and practices. My faculty respond better when we can point to research. So do ours. So do ours. But it's helpful to be able to see, what does the research say about this? There has been much conversation, there has been much work done in this space, but yet there is so much work that remains to be done. And so we hope that for many of you, this may even serve as a call to action to begin or to continue exploring in this space. What does inclusive and representative course design look like, particularly in online learning? So we hope that this was not only inspirational, but motivational for you as you move forward in the work that you do in creating these experiences for our learners. And let's see, validation is important. Yes, validation is key. We were sharing in the chat earlier how, for many of us, validation is important, just to be reminded of the fact that we are capable of meeting goals. We've met them already. And just as much as it is helpful for us to see what we have overcome and what we have done, it's beneficial for our learners too. So again, as Dr. Grady was saying, being student-centric and putting our perspective on how are our students experiencing our courses. And then let's see, a last one that I'll share. Let's see, we have one on the screen. I love this. Okay, so the importance of communication and learning from students on this topic. What design works best in making them feel inclusive? For our student population, making sure design is inclusive for all ages. I'm so glad that you shared that because again, when we think of diversity, inclusion, and representation, it is important for us to think about who are our learners? What are those experiences that they are bringing with them? And how do those experiences enrich the learning environment? And so let's take a look at some of the questions that we have, and I'm gonna pull this back forward. Okay, so, so we had a question. Was there a particular justification as to our choice of the 3 models and 3 theories, if there are many? One of the justifications, and I think one of the principal justifications, was in selecting inclusive and representative design models, and particularly theories. We wanted to make sure that we were representative of the contributors to those theories. And so these theories are representative of colleagues from Latino and Latina backgrounds, There were colleagues who are you know, standout individuals, such as Geneva Gay. And her, when we were talking about, you know, what does it mean to support and promote multicultural education, Geneva Gay, who has for many years been at the forefront of what it means to promote multicultural education, provided those 6 components, those 6 elements of what it means to ensure that and to promote that in your courses. So although there are a variety of theories and models that exist, and we encourage you to continue to explore. Again, this was not comprehensive by any means. This is not an exhaustive list, but we wanted to be representative even in the selection of the exemplars that we provided to you, kind of lead by example. And so we were very happy to be able to promote and amplify those voices that can often be overlooked. Let's see, do we have examples? I think during our conversation, we've shared a couple of examples of how we have applied these to our online courses. Dr. Grady, would you like to share an example of how you may have applied, or how you definitely have applied this in your online courses?
Yeah, so we did talk about it during the presentation, but I also answered some of it in the chat as well. And I bring that up because we're having a very engaging discussion about a computer science course, and you know, how do we get students engaged and or being engaged without the instructor just talking the whole entire time. But one thing that I have done and continue to do, I mentioned earlier, you can't be what you can't see. But one thing that I do is I have guest lecturers from diverse backgrounds come and speak to my students so that they can understand not only that they can be in these fields, but so they can understand what the possibilities are. I also try to have articles in my course that are from different authors that are from different backgrounds. And there was a course also that I recently took. Again, I'm a computer scientist. I'm an assistant professor in information science, but I took a course recently also on identity within computing. And so I'm taking that learning back into this space as well to not only talk about computing, but also the identity within computing, because we live in a very diverse world. It's not just about your racial ethnicity. There's so many other factors that are important. So those are some of the ways. And then also some of my discussion posts as well. I mentioned doing video discussions as well. That's also how you can, a way that you can create that belonging within your course, especially within the online space. You know, it's hard to create that belonging when people can't see who they're actually connecting to. So actually providing those opportunities for students to see their peers and also see me via video outside of the classroom for a discussion post or for another activity. And I mentioned a couple other tools that I use, Flipgrid. I also use something called Discord and Slack. Slack is a collaborative tool that also allows my students to engage beyond the classroom as well, and also engage with me. So those are just a couple of ways that I'm doing that. I hope that answers some of that, but there's many, many ways that you can do it. Those are just some small examples that I've done.
Thank you, Dr. Grady. And that actually answers one of the questions in the Q&A regarding how do you add inclusive, equitable design in an asynchronous course, an online course with no instructor, as this course mode in some ways seems antithetical to many of the tools discussed in the white paper. And I am so glad that question was asked, that Dr. Grady provided those examples. Many of those examples are strategies that I use. And at this time, I am teaching primarily asynchronous courses. And so it just really goes back to thinking about, again, from the perspective of the student, what would you want to see in a course? Think about, you know, your experiences potentially as having been an online student, reaching out to former students, reaching out to colleagues who may have been online students, and thinking about, you know, if you could create an environment that would feel affirming, validating, and it would feel like there was a sense of community that had been created. What would you want to see? And in doing so, and thinking from the perspective of a student, then we can explore, what exactly are those learning activities and tools that you might incorporate, again, focused on alignment, helping you to meet the objectives of the course, and simultaneously creating an experience that is inclusive and representative. And so the modality can impact some of the decisions that you make, but it should not be a barrier or a hindrance to being able to create these kinds of courses. And so we hope that these were helpful. And I think we have, so we have a lot of questions in the Q&A, and we're so thankful for them. We will capture them and provide to Quality Matters answers to these questions, recommendations, and suggestions. But we're so thankful for you joining us. And we would love to continue the conversation. So please join us on social media, contact us via email. We are more than happy to connect, to hop on a Zoom call with you and have a 2-on-1 conversation. You are more than welcome to reach out to us, but it has been an absolute pleasure working with you all and connecting with you this afternoon. And we hope that this session was enlightening, enriching, and has given you that motivation to think of ways in which you can promote inclusion and representation in your online courses. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Rico, you can stop the recording now, and I will just say that I will also post the survey in the chat one more time for you.